again, Gooners. Back in the hot seat for one more episode of The Loose Cannon. Don't know what number it is. 49, I think. Yeah, that's just a guess. I'm plucking numbers out of the air here. A bit like we do on the transfer front nowadays. Here I am getting myself comfortable. You'll have to get comfortable later. It'll be a story time. I'll give you the quiz question first, just in case you're interested in following it right until the bitter end. It doesn't get that bitter this time. It's a happy ending. I wanted to give you guys a happy ending, so here I am telling you the quiz question. Brian Talbot, he became the second player to achieve something in May 1979. I want you to tell me what that achievement is. Keep it to yourself, though, because other people might be listening and wanting to know the answer. And the other question, what was the bombshell that was dropped that summer? I'll give you a clue. It was a little bit like what's going on with Robin van Persie. So this time I think it's quite an easy quiz question. So if your kids are up watching this late at night, then gives them something to do and make them feel good about themselves getting a question right. I don't know why I'm putting my file away, because I need that. And I'm going to just run through the transfer news first of all surrounding the club. Obviously the big story, Santi Cazorla finally signing. We have to say a big thank you to Cesc Fabregas, one of my heroes, and Robert Perez, not Piros. Heroes and Piros goes together quite well, you'd say. But anyway, Perez, yeah, and obviously a great player as well. And they talked Santi Cazorla into signing for us, apparently. £16.5 million seems to be the fee, despite the fact that the club have kept it all undisclosed and secretive, as always. Anyway, I'm really pleased that Santi Cazorla signed, or Cazorla, as I believe he's called. Some people pronounce it that way. It sounds more correct if you ask me, but I'm no Spanish expert. But if I were a Spanish expert, I would know what the situation is regarding Nuri Sahin, the Real Madrid player. Could be on the move, it seems. Obviously, Jose Mourinho prepared to let him go. Is he going to sign for us? Well, the latest is on Nuri Sahin, and it's nice to have some latest news for a change. The latest is Liverpool are apparently in pole position to sign him, mainly because the relationship between Brendan Rodgers and Jose Mourinho, they're very close from days together at Chelsea. And so, looks like that's where he'll end up. Spurs have made moves for him, but Sahin has snubbed them twice, which is always nice to hear. Manchester United also apparently interested, and as are Galatasaray and Besiktas of Turkey. He's had a pretty good pre-season by all accounts. One of the stumbling blocks at the moment is that we want to sign him on a loan, first of all, with a view to a permanent move. And we're haggling. You know, it's a bit of a Monty Python term, that, haggling. And are Arsenal any good at haggling? Maybe we are. When I think about it, Andre Arshavin was finally signed after about a month's worth of haggling in January of whatever year it was he joined us. It looks like he could be leaving. Just talking about him for a moment. There is, I think I've mentioned before, apparently interest from QPR, not Spurs, Fulham, but they don't want to spend like £4 million. We want around about £7 million, which would still represent a huge loss on the transfer front when it comes to his sale. Looks like I think he's more likely to end up at Galatasaray. They're interested in him again, £4 million, though not really the sort of money we're looking for. But Andre is back in pre-season training. I hope he stays at the club and makes a name for himself once more. He's obviously got the talent. Let's hope he's got the application, and let's hope that he and Arsene Wenger can see eye to eye, because I think really that's the main thing that stands in his way. Talking of players staying, what about Robin van Persie? I had a look at the latest bookmakers' odds on him staying, and now you can get 2-1 that he's going to stay put, 4-11 for him to leave. So clearly they think he's going to leave, and they have got Manchester United as favourites to sign him. Obviously, it does seem that United are his first choice. Even money to sign Robin van Persie. As long as we get 20 million plus, I don't even mind if he joins Manchester United. I'm not looking forward to it, but I accept it as inevitable. And signing Cazorla for less money than we get for Robin van Persie's got to be a good bit of business by the club. So we have to pat them on the back for that. whoever did that deal. I mean, we tend to say it's Arsene Wenger all the time, but is it really? Is it just him? The club deserve a pat on the back if they manage to get 20 million plus for a player with only a year left on his contract. But then, how did this happen? So the club gets the blame and they also get the credit. Anyway, the other clubs are rated as possible destinations. Obviously, we've heard them. Juve, interestingly, are second favourites. That kind of surprises me. 13-8. Manchester City are out there at 15-8, so third favourites. But to me, Manchester City, even though Roberto Mancini is writing off their chances of signing Robin van Persie, he does tend to do this. We know when City won the title last season, he was saying that they had no chance, and he always underplays things. So I wouldn't read too much into what Roberto Mancini says. 20-1 are Barcelona, and 25-1 are AC Milan and Real Madrid. Everyone else is about 30-1 apparently. So doesn't look like he'll go to Spain according to the bookies. And what do they know? Well, they have to know, right? Because otherwise they're going to lose a lot of money. Well, talking of Spain, Alex Song, of course, could be on the way to Barcelona. Iniesta and Busquets would welcome him there. I think I've run through that story before, but it's sort of raising its ugly head once more. I've had a lot of fans contacting me saying that Song is worth a lot more than what I think. As I said, I value him at about £12 million. I don't think he's amazing. I think he's a very good player. Don't get me wrong. And when Arsenal don't have him in the team, sometimes we miss him a lot. But I think Francis Coquelin may be a better player one day. Maybe not next season, but maybe the season after. And we have other players like Emmanuel Frimpong, another good player. But I don't think he'll ever be quite as good as Alex Song. But I hope he proves me wrong. I really hope so. Let me just talk briefly about the other players that I don't think will sign, but are being mentioned anyway. Ibrahim Afellay, he's been linked with us for years. Looks like he's more likely to go to Liverpool. I really can't see us signing Afellay now that we've signed Cazorla. Kevin Miralles, I mentioned him the other day. Obviously, I mentioned before that CSKA Moscow were a possibility for him. The Olympiacos winger come striker has got a release clause in his contract of £6.4 million. So it does make him an interesting prospect if indeed we lose Robin van Persie. But I think the club will say, OK, we signed Cazorla for £16.5 million. So we've already spent the money. Now we're selling Robin van Persie to recoup the money we've spent. They're not going to say, OK, now that we've sold Robin van Persie, let's buy another player. They're not going to do that. Not unless we sell Andre Arshavin for £7 million, which is what we're looking for. If we sell Andre Arshavin for £6.4 million, yes, possibly I can see us making a move for Miralles. Sounds, by all accounts, it would be a very good deal from our point of view. Meanwhile, Matthias Suarez, obviously no relation to the Liverpool player. The Anderlecht player was quite close to moving to CSKA Moscow. The same club that Miralles has been linked with. That deal didn't go through because he failed his medical. So there's no way in this world Arsenal are going to pay £11.3 million. And then why would Anderlecht accept anything less? Because they'd already agreed a fee with CSKA. But you might say because he failed the medical, then his value is plummeted on the transfer front. But we shall see about that. Well, that's all about the present day for now, because obviously not a lot of match action going on, only if you're watching the Olympics. And a lot of Arsenal fans have told me they're not actually watching Olympic football. It's not the same. It doesn't give them the same buzz. But when I go back in time, I certainly get a buzz from that. And I was watching on TV just today. I was just watching the that last-minute victory at Anfield, which is so incredible. I think we'll never see a league championship finish like that. And of course, Manchester City fans may disagree, but this is not for Manchester City fans. It's the loose cannon talking to Gooners, right? So anyway, where were we? Where were we last time? I was telling you about the bad boys, wasn't I? I was telling you about going back into Phil Saw and Martin Tyler's book on Arsenal history. Yes, I was telling you about when Terry Neal sold Alan Hudson for £95,000 after he got in some trouble on the tour of the Far East, which included Australia, and Malcolm McDonald, of course, was in trouble too. So I'm going to continue now. After dealing with the bad boys of the tour, Terry Neal's next priority was to find an alternative to Dave Sexton and a call to Dave Howe, then doing a fine job for Jimmy Armfield at Leeds United, set the wheels in motion. Don Howe needed to be convinced there was no animosity remaining from his controversial departure to West Bromwich Albion in the wake of the double win. Arsenal had been incensed by West Brom's raid on their backroom staff, which also took Brian Whitehouse and George Wright to the Hawthorns. But time had healed the wounds, and within weeks Don Howe was back on familiar territory at the London Colney training ground with a new generation of Arsenal players. Without doubt, Don Howe's return was one of the best decisions the club has ever made, for the old Highbury teammates were to forge a partnership which, if not quite surpassing that of Bertie Mee and Don Howe, came very close for a time. Within a week, in that month of August, Terry Neill, with a little help from Chairman Dennis Hill-Wood, pulled off another major coup by bringing Northern Ireland goalkeeper Pat Jennings across North London for a bargain £40,000. I really just couldn't believe that transfer deal myself. Pat Jennings, arguably the best goalkeeper in the world, even then, even though he was getting on a little. Jimmy Rimmer, that inveterate warrior, had given Arsenal 3 years solid service and was probably the team's most consistent player when they battled successfully to avoid relegation in Bertie Mee's final season, but someone had to make way for one of the best goalkeepers in the world, and Jimmy Rimmer moved to Aston Villa, for whom he kept the number 1 jersey for 5 years and helped them win the 1981 league title and 1982 European Cup. Pat Jennings, however, the man with the panhandle hands and a masterful exponent of the goalkeeper's art, gave the Arsenal defence an air of impregnability and was a great reassuring presence to his teammates. The quiet Ulsterman, he had such a deep voice, he talked like that. I can't do that impression, sorry. The quiet Ulsterman had been first spotted by Watford, but after he had made just 57 appearances for the then third division side, Tottenham moved in for him. During 13 years at White Hart Lane, he had won an FA Cup winners' medal, appeared in 2 League Cup winning sides, and helped Tottenham to their UEFA Cup victory over Wolves in 1971-72. So it was kind of 1972, really. Spurs had had his understudy Barry Daines waiting in the wings for some time, and deciding that Jennings' career was drawing to a close at the age of 32, they decided to let him depart. What a mistake that was. By his own admission, it was the worst mistake Keith Birkinshaw ever made. Jennings was to play over 300 games for the Gunners, bringing his career total to 4 figures and extending his international life to over 100 caps. At 40, he played in his second successive World Cup finals campaign in Mexico in 1986. Tottenham still wince whenever his name is mentioned, for Daines was never to establish himself at the top level. Don Howe came like a breath of fresh air to training and soon put a new spring in everybody's step. He demanded loyalty, discipline, hard work and consistently high standards. His contribution was to bring the best out of all the different personalities at his disposal. The style changed too, with Don Howe immediately recognising that success relied too heavily on Malcolm MacDonald. He was asked to contribute more to overall team play, but didn't always find it easy to comply, much to the coach's frustration on the bench. The 1977-78 campaign opened with a 1-0 defeat in a freak hailstorm at Ipswich Town. What irony that this marvellous season, in which Arsenal were to figure in the Championship race, reach the League Cup semi-final and make it to Wembley in the FA Cup after an absence of 6 years, would end with the same result against the same club in far more shattering circumstances. Yes, I don't like these ironic twists at all. When 2 goals from Malcolm MacDonald in a 3-2 victory put Manchester United out of the League Cup in the second round tie at Highbury, the team were feeling sharp, highly organised and confident, but Terry Neill had one more piece of his jigsaw to rearrange. Trevor Ross had come through the apprentice ranks and played 57 games in midfield for the first team. He did a hard-tackling, productive job on the right, but Terry Neill decided that the more powerful David Price, an England youth international, who had also come through the Highbury system, was the man for that position. So, Ross went to Everton for £170,000, which I wasn't too pleased about at the time, and Terry Neill added another £70,000 to buy Alan Sunderland from Wolves. I must admit, at the time, I wasn't that delighted about that signing, but obviously Alan Sunderland proved me wrong. I wasn't upset about it, though, because I'm always happy when we get the chequebook out. One of the sharpest forwards in the First Division, Sunderland would add pace and fine technique to the forward line and was destined to score one of Wembley's most famous winning goals. It was the League Cup that first gave Arsenal the Wembley feeling. They had put 5 goals past Hull City and beaten Southampton 2-0 at Highbury before an outstanding performance by Pat Jennings earned a goalless draw at Main Road. The replay drew nearly 58,000 fans to Highbury and was a night when Alan Hudson produced the whole array of his skills to guide Arsenal through against a Manchester City side boasting such talents as Barnes, Channon, Hartford and old boy Brian Kidd. Malcolm McDonald eventually won a penalty, put away by Liam Brady to maintain his goal-around record. By this time, Arsenal were ploughing forward on 3 fronts: League Cup semi-finalists, Championship contenders, and in the 5th round of the FA Cup after brushing aside Sheffield United and Wolves. The FA Cup paired them at home with Walsall 45 years after the 3rd Division side had been responsible for the blackest day in Arsenal's history. The 2-legged League Cup semi-final proved the biggest test so far for Terry Neill's exciting young side. Liverpool, English champions for a 10th time and recently crowned European champions for the first, were formidable opponents, although this was the furthest they'd ever come in the competition. Ray Kennedy, playing with extra fervour against his old club, gave the Merseysiders a 2-1 advantage with the winning goal at Anfield. But although Arsenal were quietly confident of overturning the deficit, Liverpool's vast experience of European competition came into play, with Ray Clements in majestic form and Frank Stapleton scoring 3 good chances. Scorning. I was wondering why it said that. Scorning 3 good chances. They patiently kept a clean sheet to reach the final. Yeah, I have to say, I didn't expect us to beat Liverpool. Really didn't. So I was disappointed though, of course. But Wembley was not to prove a happy place for Liverpool, where they first discovered the hold Brian Clough's Nottingham Forest seemed to have on them. At the end of the season, Clough, of course, was to match Herbert Chapman's previously unique feat of taking different clubs to the Championship. In Chapman's case, it was Huddersfield, Arsenal, and in Clough's, Derby and Nottingham Forest. But rather than undermine confidence, Arsenal's defeat by Liverpool had strengthened the belief in themselves, because there was so little to choose between the sides. They had no trouble avenging the old Walsall score by 4-1, and it was the FA Cup giant killers of that season, Wrexham, who gave more trouble, running them very close at the racecourse ground before Arsenal reached 1978's second semi-final. It was then the gods smiled on them. Orient, using very effective counter-attacking tactics, surprisingly overcame Middlesbrough in a replay to reach their first semi-final. But are you sure that was their first semi-final? I could have sworn Orient played in another semi-final in the 70s, but early 70s. But anyway, let's continue. But by the big day, they had shot their bolt, and 2 goals from McDonald and another from Graham Rix in a one-sided game sent Arsenal to Wembley. Their opponents were to be Bobby Robson's Ipswich Town, who reached their first FA Cup final from Highbury after a dramatic 3-1 victory over favourites West Bromwich Albion. Arsenal were now clearly expected to win the Cup, and as the final approached, news of Ipswich's walking wounded saw Arsenal installed as clear favourites. And yes, I thought we were going to win that 3-4, 5-0. But the Gunners had worrying injury problems too. Sunderland was recovering from a broken toe in his foot. Rice, Nelson and Young were carrying knocks. And Malcolm McDonald had been told he needed an operation on his right knee. Not the best news before a cup final, eh? And this knee had begun to lock during games. And during the Wembley build-up, Liam Brady was carried off with a badly injured ankle at Liverpool. But they all played. Sunderland was not match fit. McDonald lacked mobility and Brady needed to be substituted, with the result that Ipswich and their delightful fans from Suffolk made the day their own with a winning goal from unsung local boy Roger Osborne, who I happened to meet one day. But I think I've mentioned that before. Terry Neill ended the day with a defiant promise that Arsenal would be back next year, but for one man, there would be no more chances to be a Wembley winner at club level after 3 heartbreaking defeats. Malcolm McDonald went into hospital 3 days after the final for the first of a series of knee operations that were to end his career at the age of 29 after only a handful of games the following season. It was also the last first-team appearance for Alan Hudson, who had begun brightly but faded. Arsenal was surprisingly to fulfil Terry Neill's post-Wembley prophecy. All losing managers say the same thing, but their qualification for the UEFA Cup was uppermost in their minds as they approached the 78-79 season. Deep down they knew that the best prospect to put in some new silverware in the Highbury Trophy cupboard was in cup competitions. For although they'd finished 5th in the First Division, the squad lacked the strength in depth to be genuine championship material. But after relishing the prospect of the European Games, Arsenal were not to meet the glamour clubs of Spain, Italy, West Germany and Holland, but efficient teams drilled behind the Iron Curtain. First came Lokomotiv Leipzig, who cracked in the last half hour at Highbury and were destroyed by Arsenal's swift counter-attacking in East Germany as they attempted to claw back 3 goals. It didn't get any easier in the second round against those old European campaigners. Hajduk split, but Liam Brady's first goal in Europe gave his side great hopes of progress despite a 2-1 defeat in Yugoslavia. Hajduk, literally translated as bandits, came to Highbury determined to defend their lead at any cost. That resulted in Liam Brady and his close marker being sent off and a second Yugoslav losing his head and being shown the red card when Willie Young, to everybody's delight and surprise, delicately chipped the goalkeeper for the winner on the night. Liam Brady's first leg effort took the Gunners through on the away goals rule. Back in the league, Arsenal were producing their best football since the heights of the double year and had shot into the top 4 by Christmas. But the European experience was soon to end on the sour note against the sharp counter-punchers of Red Star Belgrade, who were to make it all the way to the final. Yugoslavia proved a cold and unfriendly place, and the Gunners lost a drab game 1-0. Red Star dug in at Highbury for the return before a 41,566 crowd, and just when it seemed Alan Sunderland's goal had given Arsenal real hope of a place in the last 8, Savic, Red Star's international striker, broke away to equalise. With hindsight, the loss of Liam Brady through suspension to be replaced by the inexperienced Mark Healy could well have been the deciding factor. Poor old Mark Healy. But Red Star Belgrade were to do exactly the same to West Brom in the quarter-finals with breakaways at the Hawthorns. Red Star, guided from midfield by a future Arsenal import, Vladimir Petrovic, met their match in the final against Borussia Mönchengladbach. The Championship and another crack at the FA Cup soon took away the disappointment. This was a winter when Highbury's undersoil heating really earned its keep. As Arctic conditions gripped the country, the Gunners played on and kept the rhythm while their rivals ground to a halt. Arsenal were destined to reach Wembley and win what has become known as the 5-minute final because of the dramatic climax to a game in which Arsenal thought they had 2 hands on the cup by half-time. And don't forget the question coming up, which is, I've half forgotten, what was so special about Brian Talbot? What happened to him May 79? So the clue becoming clearer. And don't forget the other question was about the bombshell that followed just right after. It might have even been May, but it certainly was in the summer of 79, a bit of a bombshell. And that's the 2 quiz questions. And the answer coming up shortly, so I thought I'd warn you about that. So anyway, yes, we thought we had 2 hands on the cup by half-time, but Alan Sunderland's last-minute winner to make it 3-2 was justice for not only a superb performance on the day, but for the way Arsenal had negotiated 11 games on the road to Wembley. No opponents came any tougher than Sheffield Wednesday, then reviving themselves down in the 3rd Division under one of England's World Cup heroes, Jack Charlton. They matched Arsenal for effort in 5 unforgettable matches in a tie which gripped the public's imagination. Hillsborough's 1-1 draw was followed by a real fright at home until Liam Brady saved the day. The teams then drew 2-2 after extra time at Leicester City, and it was back to Filbert Street again to play out a 3-3 draw on one of the few pitches not icebound. The epic was finally decided on a 4th round replay by first half goals from Steve Gatting and Frank Stapleton, with Wednesday having no more to give. A total of 143,996 fans had been enthralled by 540 minutes of Classic Cup action. A lot of stats to take in there. 2 days after the first replay, Terry Neill completed the negotiations for the £400,000 transfer from Ipswich Town of Brian Talbot, whose industry and goals from the engine room of midfield had been one of the major reasons why Arsenal had finished losers at Wembley the year before. Brian Talbot celebrated his cup debut in red and white with the second goal in a comfortable 2-0 defeat of Notts County and was heading for the distinction of becoming only the second player to win cup winners' medals in successive finals with different clubs. If you know who the first one was, let me know because it doesn't say. The 5th round pairing with Brian Clough's talented Nottingham Forest side on their own ground tested the team to the full. Of course, at this stage, even though we'd signed Brian Talbot, I thought we're going to go out the cup to Nottingham Forest because them and Liverpool, they were the best teams in the land at that time. They would have been happy with a replay, but soaked up almost non-stop pressure, nullified the threat of winger John Robertson, then at his tantalising best, and broke out to win the game with a goal from Frank Stapleton. After such a performance, Arsenal's name seemed on the cup already. Yes, everyone was saying that. It was Nottingham Forest's first home defeat in 52 matches, the high point of Arsenal's late 1970s burst. The omens became even brighter when cup experts Southampton were brought back to Highbury and beaten 2-0 in a replay. The semi-final looked a difficult one. Wolves, relegation candidates for most of the season, had seemingly been revived by a new manager, John Barnwell, and as so often happens, a lowly First Division side makes hay in the FA Cup. Wolves even had the advantage of playing in their own backyard at Villa Park, but once Frank Stapleton made the breakthrough, there was only going to be one winner. How appropriate that Alan Sunderland should put the final nail in his old side's coffin with a cheeky shot through Paul Bradshaw's legs. It was the most important goal in his career so far, and the one that gave him most pleasure, at least for a couple of weeks. Although in the final there was much to fear from Manchester United, conquerors of Liverpool in the semi-finals, Arsenal, unlike the anxious men of the previous year, were eagerly anticipating the match in a relaxed and confident manner. On a hot, stifling day, with Brian Talbot running his heart out in midfield and Liam Brady and Frank Stapleton looking world class, the cup looked won with a joint effort from Sunderland and Talbot. They arrived at the same time for a shot, though the goal was later given to Brian Talbot and Stapleton's fine header. A bit like 1971 with George Graham and Eddie Kelly, of course, arriving at the same time. And I think at that moment, that's when I really thought Arsenal were definitely going to win the cup. I just thought it was a message from heaven that we were going to win. But with 5 minutes left, the game was transformed by scrappy goals from Gordon McQueen and Sammy McIlroy. When Liam Brady took the ball deep into United's half from the second kickoff, his only thought was to keep possession and hope for extra time. So fired up were Manchester United. But Graham Rix had summoned up the energy for a marvellous run, took Liam Brady's pass and slung over a perfect cross to the far post for Alan Sunderland to slide the ball in for the winner. There was no time for United to come back again. Arsenal had done it. The excitement had all come in those frantic last 5 minutes. The club just had enough time to savour their triumph before Liam Brady, the kingpin of the team, confirmed, here's the bombshell, confirmed the club's worst fears by announcing that he would be leaving Highbury after one more season when his contract ran out. He had seen Kevin Keegan leave Liverpool to make a success at SV Hamburg and hankered after such a challenge. He also believed that a move to the continent could only improve him as a footballer. Arsenal's response was an offer to make him the best paid and most secure player in England. See, it does sound a little bit like the Robin van Persie saga, apart from Liam Brady was going to go abroad. At the age of 24, Brady had already matured into one of the world's finest midfield players who could control a game or win it with that educated left foot of his. But his mind had been made up even before the cup final. And after helping Arsenal to win a trophy again, he felt he could announce his intentions with a clear conscience. There was still much to savour from Liam Brady in his final season when he produced some exceptional performances on the way to the third successive FA Cup final and the European Cup Winners' Cup final at the first attempt. But this was also a season that was to end in despair in the ill-fated Heysel Stadium, the Brussels venue where no English club has ever won a European final and which was to find its ineradicable place in football history 5 years later. So, yes, I thought I was going to leave you on a good note there, but then talking about Heysel Stadium doesn't do that at all, does it? So sorry about that. But then looking back at Liam Brady, and you know, he did put in a fine season. His last season at Arsenal was a great one. So perhaps the same could happen with Robin van Persie. Perhaps he will stay. I'm not going to put any money on it though. After I gave you those odds, it's just not worth it, is it? 2-1 was it that he's going to stay? Anyway. Don't tell you if you do win at the bookies, just let me have some, and don't blame me if you do lose money at the bookies, because I never advise gambling. So that's enough for now. Better let you go to sleep, and I should be doing the same. Until the next time, up the Gooners.